Now we're moving into composition and really sort of how pieces, how artworks are put together. How do we take those individual elements and draw them together in such a way as to make them attractive? And we've all seen this. You've seen photos where you sit there and go, wow, that's really not that great of a photo. And it's not the lighting or anything else. It's just how the people or the things in it are laid out. So let's get into compositions, and we're going to start with elements. Basically, breaking down composition into these individual pieces that you can describe when you're interpreting a piece of art, which you'll be doing probably at the end of this chapter. So we start with line. Line is the basic building block of all visual design. Anytime I work in 2 dimensions, I'm probably working with line in one way or another. And something to understand is, in nature, lines do things differently than they do in art. We're always trying to mimic that. For example, we don't see a lot of straight lines in nature. Imagine walking through a forest. Very few trees are perfectly straight. But we deal with these differently, and there are 3 forms of line that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about linear form, color edge, and implied line. So we're going to start with linear form. Linear form is exactly what it sounds like. It's a line drawing. And this doesn't have to be simple. This doesn't have to be something that you're sketching on the edge of your notebook right now. This could be something quite complex, as we see here. But this image is all line. Even the areas that you see filled in can be interpreted as simply thicker forms of line. Now, this is clearly linear, and what makes it linear is we lack dimensionality. The artist is not trying to create an illusion of depth or an illusion of space here. Then we have color edge. Now, the best way to describe line in terms of color edge is imagine holding up a piece of tracing paper and you were going to trace this piece, the Primavera. Imagine where you would put those lines. Well, of course, you're going to put them in very specific places. For example, you're going to put those lines where we have flesh tone meeting with a dark background. Even though Botticelli did not draw a line here or create one in the painting, he created one through this implication, through this color edge. So these are lines that aren't necessarily read as lines. If you look at a photograph of someone in front of a dark background, you don't say, wow, that's very linear. You would talk about the color edge to create lines that might be interesting or attractive. Finally, we have implied line. And these are lines that do not actually exist in the painting. They're simply implied to be there. And usually these are going to be receding horizontals. And what I mean by that is, imagine, just look at this piece. And what we have here is a bunch of horizontal lines. For example, the sill of this building, the base here, the steps behind the man in red. And those are all horizontal lines. And you'll notice they all recede and point back to one thing. They all point to Jesus' head in this case. And those lines don't exist. So they do here. So for example, there is a line here, but only goes to about there. It stops. But our eye doesn't. Our eye will follow that line to its intended endpoint, which in this case is the head of Jesus. So this is implied line, and oftentimes this is using the same lines we use for perspective that we'll be talking about later on. Then we have form, and for this I have naked Matthew McConaughey holding a large pipe, and I don't know why, but it's the best illustration I could find. The form is the thing that you're drawing. So it is naked Matthew McConaughey. That would be the positive element or the form. everything around him, really from him to either another form or the edge of the paper or canvas, is called negative space. And as an artist, you have to take into account not only the form, but also the shape of the negative space, since the shape of the negative space can have big implications into the interpretation of your artwork. So you have to deal with both sides of that equation. Or just don't draw naked Matthew McConaughey with a pipe. Either way.